first chapter of the book of Ephesians, and it says, Shaul, an emissary of Yahushua HaMashiach, by the desire of Elohim, to the set-apart ones who are in Ephesus, and true to Mashiach Yahushua. So, as I always mention, the fact that he's referring to himself as an emissary, right, makes him obviously a messenger, another term for it, an envoy, which are all synonyms of the term malach in Hebrew. So once Mashiach manifested on this earth, he began to use men as malachim. Before Mashiach came to the world, the closest to that were the prophets, but in a way they were still connected to a messenger in the heavens, who was the head of prophecy, who was caught up with the head of Yahuhanan the Immerser, as we have seen in other verses. So once Yahushua came, now he sends men as malachim, instead of sending a malachim to communicate with men or the prophets. Also, Shaul, which means desired. Paulus, his other name, which would be little one. That refers to the last who would come as a thief in the night, as something or somebody who is little to the eyes of the world. And he would be also the desired of nations, as appears in several parts of scriptures, but as it is prophesied in Malachi 3, when referring to John the Baptist, Yahushua, and then the Malach of the covenant, or the emissary, who confirms the covenant, as we see also in Daniel. And that is Michael. So Shaul is a representation of Michael manifesting on this earth as the emissary, as we see in Revelation 22, when he talks about Mashiach sending his messenger to give testimony. Therefore, his messenger, the Malach, Michael, would manifest as the witness, one of the two witnesses of Revelation 11. So Shaul, an emissary of Yahushua the Messiah, by the desire of Yahweh, Elohim, to the set-apart ones who are in Ephesus and true to Messiah, Yahushua. Favor to you and shalom from Elohim, our Father, and the sovereign Yahushua HaMashiach. Blessed be the Elohim and Father of our sovereign Yahushua the Messiah, who has blessed us with every spiritual blessing in the heavenlies in Messiah. Here, I think it's important to understand that Yahweh is not only Father, but also Elohim of Yahushua, right? Because many unite the Messiah and the Father in a different way than what the scripture tells us, that he is one, right? Yahushua said that his Father and him are one, but as we know, the Father remained on heaven while Mashiach manifested on earth. And Mashiach himself said, Yahweh is greater than I, the Father is greater than I. So here we see how Yahweh is also the mighty one, or the Elohim of Yahushua. Yahushua is not his own mighty one, right? Or anything like what we would think when we were in the false doctrines of the world, like Christianity, and so on and so forth. So, blessed be the Elohim and Father of our sovereign Yahushua the Messiah. So he has given us every spiritual blessing. They are all available. All we need to do is take them, ask for them in the sense of praying with faith and receiving them through that same faith, because the lack of faith is what would block these spiritual blessings from coming to us. Everything that is in heaven, every spiritual blessing comes to us through Mashiach, while we are in Mashiach. Even as he chose us in him before the foundation of the world, even as he, Yahweh, chose us in him, Yahushua, before the foundation of the world, that we should be set apart and blameless before him in love. So, first of all, very important that he chose us before the foundation of the world. So, well, in Hebrew, foundation is the term yesod, which is one of the lower sephirot in the tree of life. But it is connected to the point right before action, or right before the actual manifestation. It is connected to Yahusef and also the Brit Milah, or the covenant of the circumcision. Obviously, we know that that refers to the spiritual circumcision. So it's pretty much the time before earth was created, right after Samael was cut off as the circumcision, in the sense that once Samael, the Malach that was first created with the name Ariel, fell through his rebellion, he got cut off and put to the left, and one of his children put to the right, given some light, that became Lucifer. Those two angels, on the left, on the right, were what started what we know as justice and injustice, right and left. And that's when pretty much destiny, or as some would say, fate, was created, when those two, justice and injustice, were separated from each other, as the light was separated from the darkness. So at that moment, everything else was put into place pretty much. So even as he chose us in him, because one is that we need to be in Mashiach in order to enter the next reality, in order to be one with Yahweh, to continue with living. But also chose us in him because when it comes to the chosen few, in the beginning would have been part of Mashiach himself, but the female part, as in, remember, as I have explained, truth and wisdom as one, but in the beginning, wisdom separated from truth, and through wisdom, the foundations were set. But it was in wisdom that we were, at least within the will of the Father. So just by existing in the will of the Father, we were chosen from before the foundation. But like I said, pretty much the soul that entered Adam and eventually became us came from the Father through wisdom, which was the counterpart of the truth, which is Yahushua. And that part separated from the third heaven, from the Father, from the Son, and descended all the way to this reality, where the Father decided to come and get us through Mashiach, for he has chosen us from before the foundation of the world, that we should be set apart and blameless before him, as it says in Revelation, when it speaks about the chosen few, in love. For we know Yahweh is love, and Yahweh so loved the world that he sent his only begotten Son to save us. So it was because of love, because he is love, that he sent out of love his Son to show his love and give us forgiveness, so that we may enter eternity through love, for love is the fulfillment of all of the law. So, having previously ordained us to adoption as sons, having previously ordained us Remember that it is Paul speaking, Shaul, and he is a Hebrew Israelite from the tribe of Benjamin. So I say that because in Christianity, it is commonly well understood or believed by many, not necessarily taught, but believed by many, that only the Gentiles are getting the adoption, that the Jews, as they would say, are children. Yet we see here a Yahudi, whom they would say Jew, saying that he himself needed adoption. And that is important, I repeat, because that shows how every single human being needs adoption from Yahweh. Only Yahushua, as I just said, as John says, the only begotten Son. And I think this translation has it a bit different, but let's check it out anyways. For Elohim so loved the world, for Yahweh so loved the world that he gave his only brought forth Son. His only brought forth Son, or his only begotten Son. So everybody else needs adoption. Everybody else needs adoption. And the only way to become a child is through his only brought forth Son, his only begotten. As also John says in chapter 1, verse 12, but as many as received him, the only begotten Son, to them he gave the authority to become children of Yahweh, to those believing in his name. To those believing in his name. So it is through his name that we become children, for we all need adoption through Mashiach, who is the only begotten Son. And that is also the reason why in Isaiah says, your first father sinned. Your first father, because we all need adoption, because our first father sinned. Right? And well, if I wanted to take it a little bit further, no, I'll leave it there. Well, the point I was going to make is that it says your first father sinned and your interpreters have transgressed against me. There's something interesting that I'll connect with this that we just saw. So Luke 3 is the other genealogy. And it says right over here. And when Yahushua himself began, he was about 30 years of age, being as reckoned by law, son of Yosef, of Eli, of Matidyahu, of Levi, of Melechi, etc., etc., all the way to the end when it says, of Enosh, of Shet, of Adam, of Elohim. Of Elohim, right? It doesn't say of Yahweh, but Elohim. And that is key, because then in Isaiah, when it says your first father sinned, it would have been talking about Adam, but Elohim. And remember that the term Elohim, it refers to an angel that had to do with the making of the flesh, that had to do with matter, instead of the soul, which I just explained came from wisdom, the counterpart of Mashiach, which is truth, right? Who is the truth. So I hope that was understood and I didn't get anybody confused. That's why I was thinking about leaving it there. So I'll continue. So that's why we need adoption, because we had a first father who sinned. Not only Adam, who took the fruit, but an angel who was the one in charge of making the body, just like a father on earth gives the seed or the body to be created within the mother. So having previously ordained us through to adoption, so we all need adoption, every human being, through Mashiach, the only begotten. And that's why he came from a virgin, having previously ordained us to adoption as sons through Yahushua the Messiah to himself. according to the good pleasure of his desire. According to the good pleasure of his desire, which interestingly enough is the meaning of Shaul, the desired one. So through Mashiach, he would get the last, and through the last, the 144,000, and then the many, and then the nations. Having previously ordained us having previously ordained us to adoption as sons through Yahushua the Messiah to himself, according to the good pleasure of his desire. Because he is love, he has good pleasure and a desire to adopt us, for he is good, to the praise of the esteem of his favor, with which he favored us in the beloved. To the praise of the esteem of his favor, with which he favored us in the beloved, in whom we have redemption through his blood. Remember that beloved is the meaning of the name David, the king. And here we see it, for he was in the flesh a descendant of David, for he is the beloved one, as he said when he was immersed by Yohanan the Immerser, and the Ruach HaKodesh came as a dove, and Yahweh spoke that he was his son, the only one, the beloved, to the praise of the esteem of his favor, with which he favored us in the beloved, in whom we have redemption through his blood, the forgiveness of trespasses according to the riches of his favor. According to the riches of his favor. And since he is the one who creates riches, therefore he has all the favor to give. Not only that, but remember that the name Yahushua, the Shua, means salvation, but also means riches. So that's why in whom we have redemption. Redemption pretty much means to be bought. When a person would become a slave, that person needed redemption, somebody to pay what he owed, which was the reason why he became a slave. So we became slaves to sin, right? So we needed redemption from sin. That's why in whom we have redemption through his blood. For through his death, he who had no sin paid for all those who needed redemption from sin through the forgiveness of trespasses, according to the riches of his favor. So through the riches of his favor, he paid the redemption with his blood to give us forgiveness, which he has lavished on us, right? Talking about the favor, according to the riches of his favor, which he has lavished on us in all wisdom and insight. So it's not talking about money or fame or power, even though we will get power and fame eventually when the Father reveals who are his chosen. But that is secondary, at least it should be to us, for that in this reality is vanity. So we understand that true riches are wisdom and insight, for wisdom and knowledge are better than silver and gold. And we need to understand that it's very important because it is all available. It's all about looking to the scriptures through the name of the Messiah to receive the Ruach that teaches us all things, according to the riches of his favor, which he has lavished on us in all wisdom and insight, having made known to us the secret of his desire. This is super important because a lot of people think that Yahweh desires them to not eat a bunch of things, to not do a bunch of things. to act a certain way, and they are doing just the desires of a certain person who made those commandments of men, who had a certain opinion according to the letter of the Torah, but didn't know through the love of Yahweh, through the Ruach of Yahweh, how to fulfill those commandments that Yahweh gave us. That's why we need insight. They had outsight. They could only see the outward part, the letter, and didn't get it. We need to go in and find that insight, be able to look within instead of without. By looking in, not only within us, but also into the scriptures and what everything means other than what it just seems, we get to understand, as it says here, having made known to us the secret of his desire. Part of, well, of the desire that he's referring to is that he wanted to adopt us through the forgiveness of sins given to us by Mashiach. And he revealed to us through the scriptures why that was his desire, why that had to be fulfilled. And also reveals to us what is his desire regarding us, how we should act, starting from the moment when we understood and accepted Mashiach as our Savior. Having made known to us the secret of his desire according to his good pleasure, which he purposed in him, right? To make us children. That was the purpose of Mashiach coming to this world. To administer at the completion of time, which we are reaching, to gather together in one, all in Mashiach. Because since the congregation is the body of Mashiach and the many are the blood, then all will be one in Mashiach, gathered together as the cells in a body. To gather together in one, all in Mashiach, both which are in the heavens and which are on earth in him. That's why he came as the first and the last, heaven and earth. For those who are in the heavens and those who are on the earth. When first and last become one, then everything else will follow. As Adam and Eve will become one, heaven and earth will become one, the congregation and Mashiach will become one. To gather together in one, all in Messiah, both which are in the heavens and which are on earth in him. In whom also we did obtain an inheritance. Since Mashiach is the only begotten, then he is the one who gets the inheritance from the Father. So, since we are his body, we receive that inheritance, and that was part of the plan. And that's what the enemy wanted to keep. That's why he killed Mashiach, not understanding that by killing Mashiach, when he would resurrect, and us through him would be able to get the inheritance, because for the inheritance to be given, somebody needs to die, right? For there is a testament. And for the testament to apply, right, the person that wrote the testament needs to die. So Yahweh wrote the testament and came and died. And those who killed him thinking they could get the inheritance didn't understand that that was the way in which we would get it, according to the desire of the Father. So in whom also we did obtain an inheritance, being previously ordained according to the purpose of him, working all matters according to the counsel of his desire. His desire, his will, same thing. And it would be ratzon in Hebrew, and it would be one of the terms used to refer to the Ruach HaKodesh. And that is who counsels Yahweh, as the thought counsels the mind, as a wife, the husband. In whom also we did obtain an inheritance, being previously ordained according to the purpose of him, working all matters according to the counsel of his desire. And that is also very important because that shows how everything is according to his desire. Nothing gets out of his hands. For us to be the praise of his esteem, because by us receiving forgiveness, and not only the forgiveness, but also the inheritance, and become children of Yahweh, the Creator himself, then we will no doubt forever, eternally praise him. For us to be the praise of his esteem, those having first trusted in Mashiach. Those having first trusted in Mashiach. So those who trust in what Mashiach did will receive the inheritance and therefore will praise Yahweh eternally. Those having first trusted in Mashiach, in whom you also, having heard the word of the truth, which is the name of the Messiah, right? Which is here, the word of the truth, Yahweh saves us, Yahushua, in whom you also having heard the word of the truth, the good news of your deliverance. The good news, what are the good news? That Yahweh saves us. And I could say Yahweh saved us through Yahushua. And the point is, that is the actual meaning of the word that happens to be the name of the Messiah, the name above every name through which we can be saved. In whom you also having heard the word of the truth, the good news of your deliverance, in whom also having believed, you were sealed with the Ruach HaKodesh of promise. Having heard the word of truth, the good news of your deliverance. Remember that the Ruach HaKodesh, according to John 14:26, comes through the name of the Messiah. So us having heard the word of the truth, the good news of your deliverance, that Yahweh saves, which is also interesting because then it says, in whom also, whom, because it's talking about a person. What person? Yahushua, which is the word that is the good news. In whom you also having heard the word of the truth, the good news of your deliverance, in whom in whom also having believed, you were sealed with the Ruach HaKodesh of promise. Because the Ruach of Shavuot, which they received back in the day, was a guarantee, a promise that what we will experience will happen. Who is the pledge of our inheritance? You were sealed with the Ruach HaKodesh of promise, who is the pledge of our inheritance, until the redemption of the purchased possession, to the praise of his esteem. What I was saying, the promise, the Ruach HaKodesh given on Shavuot after Mashiach resurrected, was the guarantee that he will redeem. It is like when a couple gets engaged. That was the engagement. Now comes the wedding of the Lamb, who is the pledge of our inheritance, the promise, the Ruach, until the redemption, which is coming, of the purchased possession, the wife, the congregation, to the praise of his esteem. Verse 15, for this reason, I too, having heard of your belief in the sovereign Yahushua and your love for all the set apart ones, do not cease giving thanks for you, making mention of you in my prayers. That the Elohim of our sovereign, once again, the Elohim of our sovereign Yahushua the Messiah, the Father of honor, the Father of splendor, the Father of esteem, would give you a ruach of wisdom and revelation in the knowledge of him. Would give you a ruach of wisdom and revelation in the knowledge of him. The eyes of your understanding, being enlightened. This is important, for we know a lot of people have eyes in their body, but not in their understanding. That's why Yahushua would talk about those with eyes to see, or those with ears to hear, let him hear. It's talking about ears that can understand, not only hear. Because a lot of people can hear, few can understand. The eyes of your understanding being enlightened, so that you know what is the expectation of his calling. So this is, like I said, very important, for it is through the Ruach that Yahweh will give light to our understanding, so that we may actually comprehend what Yahweh expects from us. While people think nothing, just believe, which they actually don't even understand what believe is or what their belief should be, but they think it's just believe, receive the grace as they call it, and just wait for the rapture. And few understand that they should love their neighbor, and I say understand because many or all know it, but few understand it because even fewer practice it. The eyes of your understanding being enlightened, so that you know what is the expectation of his calling, and what are the riches. What are the riches? Not what people are expecting. I repeat, money, power, and fame most of the time. That's what they hope are the riches of the one who called them. But as I said, Yahushua means Yahweh in riches. But we need to come to understand through the enlightenment of our understanding, what are those riches? And what are the riches of the esteem of his inheritance in the set apart ones? And what is the exceeding greatness of his power toward us who are believing? Toward us who are believing. A lot of people do not see it because they don't believe it. According to the working of his mighty strength. Strength, power, greatness, esteem, rich. So, and what are the riches of the esteem of his inheritance in the set apart ones, and what is the exceeding greatness of his power toward us who are believing, according to the working of his mighty strength, which he wrought in the Messiah when he raised him from the dead. Which he wrought, right? His mighty strength, his power. He wrought in the Messiah when he raised him from the dead and seated him at his right hand in the heavens, far above all rule and authority. Listen to this. Far above all rule and authority and power and mastery. 1, 2, 3, 4. As the four corners of the earth, and also as the four levels of creation. So he's above that as Adan Kadmon, the primordial men, the image of the Father, to which he referred when he said, let us make men in our image and likeness. So he is far above all rule, authority, and power and mastery, connected to emanation, creation, formation, and action. But more than that, and every name that is named, not only in this age, but also in that which is to come. So his name is above every name that is named. First of all, we see that The name of the Father and the Son should be named, not like Jews claim it is forbidden. Other than that, see how it says it is above every name that is named. A lot of people are naming the name that is not. And we all need to understand which one is the only one that is above every other name that is named. Not only in this age, but also in that which is to come. So if the naming of the name didn't matter, why would Paul write this? So, far above all rule and authority and power and mastery and every name that is named, not only in this age, but also in that which is to come. And you know how people say, oh, no, that's how they would call him 2,000 years ago. Now we call him Jesus. So they say that even in this own reality, in this time, the scripture tells us not only in this age, but also in that which is to come. So always, forever, all time, the same, exactly, confirmation. And he put all under his feet. And he put all under his feet. Right? Because he was taken above all authority, so everything was put under his feet. That seems like in the literal sense, of course, but in the spiritual is even greater, the fact that everything was put under his authority. And he put all under his feet and gave him to be head over all to the assembly. So he's the head of the congregation, which is his body, the completeness of him who fills all in all. The completeness of him who fills all in all. He is the perfection that we need. He is the completeness of that emptiness that we felt when we did not have him, when we did not know him. He completes us. And that's why without him, there's nothing that we can do. But with him, we can do all things because he is the completeness. All right. So that's how that chapter ends. Let me see if there are questions or comments. Can verse 9 be used with Amos 3:7 to show that Yahweh tells us his plans, etc.? Yes, no doubt. Let me read verse 9 again. Having made known to us the secret of his desire. Exactly. It's a secret, so nobody knows, but he reveals it to us according to his good pleasure, which he purposed in him. But yeah, that connects and obviously is even clearer in Amos, as you just mentioned. Amos 3, verse 7. For the sovereign Yahweh does no matter unless he reveals his secret to his servants, the prophets. His secret to his servants, the prophets. As we just read here, having made known to us the secret of his desire. Yeah. So that's wonderful.